This is the Darcy Giroux Podcast, episode 45. Today, my guest is Nadine Wellwood. She is a devoted advocate and business owner, and we're going to be talking about her new project, the 1905 Committee. Nadine Wellwood, welcome to the Darcy Giroux Podcast. How are things?
Oh, things are going great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for reaching out and telling me about the your new project, the 1905 Committee, which we'll get into. But first, maybe we'll give the listeners an introduction of yourself. Tell them who you are.
Sure. Well, I have had a rather eclectic background. I've been involved in a number of different industries, including health, recreation. I've worked for the Department of National Defense. I owned an aerospace and defense company. I had a company that focused and our expertise was on human factors engineering and modeling and simulation. Try saying that 5 times fast. And from there, I'm a chartered investment manager, and I've worked in finance for the last 2 decades. And I've held my designation now since about 2015, I do believe. And so I've owned my own investment securities firm, and I sold that in 2019, 2020. And so, yeah, I've got quite a bit of background. I got involved politically around 2018 when I called the unicorn of politicians, Mr. Maxime Bernier, came out with the People's Party of Canada, and I fell in love with his policies. And his policies, I just thought, were so much on track with what Albertans truly wanted. And ran here in Banff Airdrie. I call Cochrane home, and I have for 20 plus years. And I just got involved, and I've stayed involved ever since. I realized my husband kind of challenged me and said, "Hey, what are you going to do about it?" I complained more than my fair share. And so I said, "I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to do about it." And I ended up getting involved, and I've stayed involved. But yeah, it's you want change, you have to be the change you want to see in the world, to quote Mahatma Gandhi. I think that's the only way. We put so much reliance on leaders and, people going to save us, and the only people going to save us are us.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. So as far as your current political involvement, anything outside of the 1905 committee? Like, do you consider yourself a politician? Do you consider yourself an activist?
I would say I am an advocate for sure. I wouldn't call myself a politician, although I did run for the UCP in Livingston McLeod. I won the nomination down there and would be the MLA today. But the executive of the UCP party actually disqualified me, which, that's part of the reason why the 1905 committee exists. We can't claim to be a grassroots party when the grassroots select a candidate, go through the process. 900 UCP members bought new memberships in 10 days when I ran down there for my candidacy. Went through the whole process. The CA put my name forward to be their candidate, and to have the top-down approach of disqualifying me because I had differences of opinion. And I think the reality was they knew they could not control me, and I can't be whipped, basically. And for that reason, I think they just sought, to disqualify me to begin with. So, that's a big part of the reason why 1905 exists. But I am also working on an Alberta pension plan. I am a chartered investment manager. And so I started the Alberta First Pension Plan, which has been taken over by another group. And they're running more with it now than I am. But I do my own, I call it the Alberta Pension Project. So I work on projects. And the Alberta pension is still a very near and dear to my heart. I'm still doing meetings. I'm up in Grand Prairie actually on June 20th, hosting 2 meetings up there, one in Albright Hall and then the other one at the Holiday Inn in Grand Prairie on the 20th of June. And from there, we're also going to do some in Calgary. I'm working with a wonderful lady. Her name is Kate Graham, and she's starting a project called I Am Albertan. And she's really going to take Alberta, the Calgary portion of the Alberta Pension Plan, and help promote it there and get me in front of some businesses and some Calgarians so that we can share the merits of and the benefits and the greater financial security that's available to Albertans through an Alberta pension plan. And let's get out of this Canada pension plan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I definitely want to get into that in a little bit here. Um, but I actually don't know anything about this. You being disqualified from the UCP. What was their rationale? I mean, like, or what were the specifics of their reasoning?
Well, it's been a lot of fun actually when I go back and I read it. But that I was a conspiracy theorist around COVID, which, as we now know, COVID is those conspiracies have been debunked many times. The truth is coming out. They didn't like my views on Ukraine. I have an aerospace and defense background. I've worked for NATO, and I knew and understood the history of Ukraine. And I had a difference of opinion. They were all about support Ukraine, 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 go to war with Russia. And I was like, how about we not go to war with Russia? How about we stop this war before it starts? And we can provide, a rational viewpoint, and NATO should back away from pushing Ukraine into this conflict. And they didn't like that, of course, because a lot of people just jumped on the, well, we have to support Ukraine and freedom. And this wasn't about Ukraine. This was a political agenda that happened there. And I was very outspoken about it. And in my interview, I even called them out on that. I said, look, anybody in this room who feels they have information to present, if I'm wrong, then I will happily admit that I'm wrong. If you have more information and you're more knowledgeable and you have more experience and expertise than I do, then by all means say something. The room was silent, right? Which is why the CA put my name forward, because I'm not an irrational person. I'm a very logical, analytical person who looks at the facts, and has a breadth of knowledge. And having worked in the aerospace and defense sector, there was nobody that could, come up with a logical reason why, my arguments were any less full of merit than theirs. They were just going along with public polling. Another one I thought was really good was I called for Tyler Shandro to go to jail. And they were all too happy to bring that up. And when I brought that up, they're like, well, you call for Tyler Shandro, but you can't call for your political opposition to go to jail. I'm like, well, for one, he's not my political opposition, and I didn't call for him to go to jail for that reason. At the time, the day before my interview, I think Pastor Tim Stevens had just been 100% fully acquitted, like fully acquitted, not a charge laid, for after having spent 21 days in jail. And my response was, what do you think is a fair and just consequence for the policymaker who put him there? And crickets, but it doesn't matter, because I could come back with these logical, very rational responses. I think that just made matters worse for the UCP executive, because they knew it would be very hard to work around me. And they certainly knew that I was not going to be whipped into going along with a propaganda narrative. I was definitely that type of person who I want the facts. And if you can dissuade me otherwise, then by all means present your argument, but you were going to have to present an argument that was based on fact and information, not just a statement or a claim or an arbitrary, this is what we're going along with for the sake of going along. So I wasn't a team player, apparently.
Well, that is fantastic. For our listeners who don't know, Tyler Shandro was the former Alberta Health Minister, I believe was his title, and under Jason Kenney, who there was a lot of disappointment in our leadership here in Alberta through COVID, and especially a division that ran very deep in the UCP. I had trashed my UCP membership fairly early on when Jason Kenney became the leader, but anyway, just a little bit of background in case we do have a lot of listeners from the rest of Canada and even into the US that might be listening and not know who we're talking about. Um,
Well, it's really funny because with Chandro, he's just now landed in a nice, soft, cushy position. He just got appointed as one of the directors for Covenant Health, which is like the second largest health provider in Alberta. And I have to say, save Jason Kenney himself, he was probably the least liked
mhm.
of any of the ministers. So, I find, we're returning to the days of, the Tory reward system of, people in politics find these nice soft landings.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's, we'll see if he decides to run again. But yeah, no love lost between me and Tyler.
Yeah. No. Well, I think he might have been my MLA before I moved to a different part of town, but um I remember my wife telling me, "Oh, we got to get out and vote, or the NDP will get in," and all this, and I said, "There's no way I'm voting for that guy. I am not showing up that day." It's hard enough to get me out to vote, but not especially not for him. Oh, that's hilarious. Um, so let's talk about the 1905 committee. So is this a would this be considered like a political action committee?
Absolutely. So, there's a gap I feel right now in the political space with the grassroots. So many people, I think, have become disillusioned with Danielle Smith. And unfortunately, the people that surround Danielle have convinced her that she has the majority support of the UCP members. I think that's incorrect. And I think reality needs to be shared. And the unfortunate part is there's so many people that have moved away and they move away without saying anything, right? It's like, oh, I'm done. And instead of sticking it out and but the problem is they didn't know where to go. So I think Take Back Alberta is kind of falling apart. There's some other freedom movements that are kind of drifting away. The sense of urgency, on specific matters, is kind of gone. So people are becoming a little more complacent. But more importantly, I think a lot of people just don't know where to go now and what to do and how to stay actively involved. And I think politics, I view it like a muscle. You just need to work it out 10, 15 minutes every day and you'll see huge impacts. And we can't put our reliance in a leader. No one's coming to save us, right? We have to save ourselves. And that means that we have to get back to grassroots. That means that leaders have to listen to the people who they represent. And that's not happening. Like it truly is not happening. And so the 1905, I think, is kind of birthed out of a lot of that. And, it's about active citizenry. Get involved, stay involved. And people go, well, how do I do that? We're going to show you how to do that. So the first thing that we're doing here is we're kind of kicking it off, giving people enough information on policies. And we're having an inaugural meeting here, as you know, because hopefully you're going to be attending on the 24th of June at the Ranchman's Club downtown, where we've got a breadth of people coming from different areas of life, political backgrounds. Some people don't support UCP. Some people do support UCP. I want to hear from everybody. And they're going to help the 1905 committee truly solidify those 5 to 7 key non-negotiable principles, that we can rally behind. Because the problem is how do you assess whether a leader is doing a good job or a bad job? Right? You have to have some foundational key principles, policies to hold them to account to. And I think that's realistically where I want to go, a very professional organization that looks at things from a very factual, analytical perspective, that keeps that kind of report card of how are you doing so that you can get real, honest feedback from the people. As to, and then share that information and then give workshops, information, share that with people so they can make informed decisions and then get actively involved. I tried to find out who my CA president was here in Cochrane. And, I'm politically astute. Couldn't find it. It's not publicly listed anywhere. There's no phone number. There's no website. And I mean, how do you get involved when you don't even, something as basic as that?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't find the information. Most people would give up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and so where does the name come from? Where does I'm assuming it has to do with the year 1905, but
1905 was when Alberta became a province. And that, I always tell people, has special relevance to this because what if we could do it all over again? What would it look like if you had a blank sheet of paper? What are the things that we could do differently? How would we, um, have structured ourselves? What are some of the things that maybe we would have avoided? Some of the things that we could have done, knowing all that we know now? What would that look like for you? And so that was the whole intent between 1905. It's a little bit of nostalgia, but it's also about rebuilding and recreating and looking forward to the future.
oh yeah, no, I like that. I like that. Um, so is it you mentioned that people it can be for people who are sided with the UCP or potentially not. You're obviously you're reaching out to some um more well, I mean people like myself, people who are maybe a little more disillusioned with politics in general but are still interested in kind of the philosophy and economics that go into making good policy. Um, but I guess what I'm wondering, so is it UCP focused or is it, I mean, in the event that a um, NDP government, who's really the only other viable political party in the province, from what I can see, um, in the event that they are in power, is there still a role for this organization?
Absolutely. So I think that's the key with a lot of these organizations that have sprung up over the last 3 years. They were very driven around one specific thing. And that was great because they were very focused. They got stuff done. But the reality is, once they accomplished the goal, it now became a matter of what's next, right? You kind of lose direction a little bit. Now you have you're sort of drifting in the wind a tad. So for us, it's about holding leadership accountable. And I mean, right now, obviously, we have a UCP government. And so obviously, our focus is there and it will be there for the next 3, 4 years, however long they are. And then we'll see what happens after that. So the reality is, but it has to be grassroots and it has to be principled. So we're not focusing on, parties. We're not focusing on people. I've had people come and go, why are you so against Danielle Smith? And it's like, I'm not against Danielle Smith. I think she is a lovely woman. I've met her a number of times. I like her as a person, wears her heart on her sleeve. But the reality is she doing a good job as a premier is a different question as to whether or not I like her. And the only way to assess whether she's doing a good job as a premier is to look at the promises that she made. And is she upholding those promises? And look, it's a report card. And, if she surrounds herself with a bunch of yes men, and they're telling her, oh, what a great job you're doing. That's fantastic, Danielle. Keep going. Great job. Great job. I can assure you right now, there are plenty of people in the UCP that do not think she's doing a great job. And I'm not talking about the people who didn't like her to begin with. I'm talking about people who put her there, who are now like, okay, you've not delivered.
Right, right, yeah.
Right?
So this,
So,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
that's
interrupt,
okay.
but this plays into like one of the main planks of the 1905 committee's platform, which is leadership accountability. And I guess my question with this is always, I think it's a good idea to review their, what they've done, or do they have integrity? Is the question. Have they fulfilled on what they said they were going to? It almost never happens. What I mean, and beyond that, how do we hold them accountable other than, potentially replacing them?
Well, I mean, I think realistically, I have a big problem with career politicians to begin with. I think that is a huge problem that needs to be addressed. But I think we need to, again, it's about educating the population so that they understand why that's a problem. And the reality is, when you have a career politician, their job, right, is to get reelected. And so, they pander to special interests, they pander to the people who support them. And why? Because they need to get reelected, or they feel they need to get reelected. And I don't think politics should be a career at all. I think it should be a service that we provide. And you come in and you run on a campaign, you get elected based upon, the promises that you made, and then you should fulfill those promises. And it's a different way of looking at things, but when your whole career, your whole life's work, right, it's built around being a politician, that means you have to have a platform, you've got to get reelected. You are going to bend, and you are not going to necessarily have the same strength and conviction to get stuff done. And so it's about making change, and you can only make change at the grassroots level, I think. And where we become more powerful than those special interest groups. And I think there's ways to do that through policy. So one of the policies you'll notice in our platform is a flat tax policy. Now people go, oh, that's awesome. That's great. That means more money in my pocket. Yes, it absolutely does. But you know what else it does? Because as that follower of Austrian economics and that more libertarian view, it takes away the power from the special interests and the lobbyists to campaign using their dollars, right, for special tax deductions, tax credits, tax benefits. So that's the beauty of a flat tax. And that's putting the power back into the hands of the grassroots, the people, the electorate en masse, rather than these special small interest groups.
Yeah.
And lobbyists.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, any reduction in tax is always a good thing, and I will never understand how it can sometimes be an unpopular political platform item, but and especially, yeah, it is the flat tax, especially as a reduction in overall taxation. It ultimately restrains what government can do in a sense. Like they cannot, it restrains their recklessness to some degree, right? Give us a little bit of history on the flat tax, or Alberta's income tax thing, because it was recently changed, and there have been promises to change it again, and this might be one of those things that we're talking about when we're talking about Danielle Smith and accountability, I think. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So the reality is Alberta had what we call the Alberta Advantage. And that was a very low tax for both business and personal. We used to be the lowest in Canada, and that is not the case any longer. Now, business-wise, to Jason Kenney's credit, he did reduce the tax back to 8%. But the personal taxes have never been adjusted, because once Rachel Notley under the NDP came in, and of course their progressive tax came back, that's where the Alberta Advantage kind of went away. And that discourages people from coming here, and it discourages business from coming as well, because the people, they need to attract good employment and good employers, right? There needs to be opportunity. So we're seeing the business shift a little bit more now. But we're not kind of seeing it flow down on the individual basis. So Danielle did run on the promise of lowering taxes, and she hasn't done that. And she's had 2 full budget cycles where she could have done that, even as interim leader, and now as leader. And so for me, I looked at it, well, why haven't you done that? She's out promoting a high-speed rail between Calgary and Edmonton, which, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, is not the point. The point is, it is not the time. Albertans are struggling. Affordability is a huge issue. Inflation is a huge issue, and these are things that need to be addressed first and foremost. And you ran on a campaign. You got elected saying you were going to reduce taxes, and you have not done it. So those are the things that I really want to bring attention to, in hopes that we, as a large group of individuals who all come together, and it doesn't matter, can say, you made a promise made needs to be a promise kept.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any evidence, or from what you've seen in the UCP these days, that there is the political will to do away with the progressive tax structure and back to a flat tax? Like, is that Is that actually a possibility within the party? I guess my question is this beyond Danielle Smith's decision making at this time, or is it actually a popular item still within the UCP?
Well, I mean, based upon her own statements and comments, whether it's popular with her or not, or the UCP, they're looking at potentially 2027. Oh, it'll have to be phased in and all this language. But the reality is here, Danielle Smith, I mean, if you look at the Danielle Smith of yesteryear, right? Let's go back to 2012. And she was always an advocate for smaller government with less spending. And what did she do when she got into government? It's the largest government we've ever had, and it is the most expensive budget we've ever had. Now she's saying, oh, the budget has balanced itself, but here's another policy. I haven't put it forward, but here's another potential policy. How about we restrict the budget to tax revenues, not royalties? Right now, that constrains government spending. Now they have to get a little more discerning as to where they're going to spend their money. It can't be pet projects, right? And let's get government focused on what it's supposed to be doing. Calgary just had a water main break. People are like, how could this happen? Well, when was the last time Calgary put any money into actual infrastructure upgrades, which is what is on their mandate, as opposed to the climate emergency budget that was all this money is going towards? So, I would really love to see, and there's the libertarian side of me coming out, government restricted, Frederick Bastiat has a little book called The Law. And it's very, very, very small. And it talks about what the proper role of government actually is. Boy, wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit pie in the sky quite yet, but if we educate people as to the right policies, and we can get them to focus and assess policy based upon the right principles, I think we can get there.
Right. Yeah. No, the law is a fantastic. I don't even know. It's not that long, and it's
80
probably
pages.
Yeah.
In the public domain.
Yeah. Yeah,
Can be
for
read
sure.
in any school for
Yeah.
free.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's
Right?
fantastic. Yeah, I have multiple copies of it on my bookshelf. Um, yeah, this water main thing in Calgary. Talk about, it's hard to believe so for people listening, the water main broke. All of Calgary is basically being asked to conserve water. We're going to run out of water, are the threats. And the water main break does look bad. I cannot for the life of me understand how the infrastructure does not have the ability to isolate portions of those pipes. I mean, either it is so ridiculously outdated, or this is where the I find entertainment in the kind of Twitter Calgary conspiracy people that are making the claim that city council is using this as some sort of thing to drive their climate emergency agenda further, because they didn't get the extreme drought they were hoping for. So now there's something else they need to push some of these policies through. And I'll be honest, whether the water main break is, I doubt it's purposeful, but politicians in general will always, what's the classic line? Never let a crisis go to waste, right? So
never let a good crisis go to waste.
That's right.
Well, and the reality is, as somebody who worked with a number of engineers, modeling and simulation, you look at pipelines when they go in. There's always breaks where that flow can be turned off, right? Or a spill limited or contained in some sort of shape or way. And I mean, water is no different. I mean, if you want to talk about a valuable resource, water is just as valuable as oil, in my opinion. And yet our infrastructure, though, is old. I mean, to be honest, and it hasn't been updated or kept current, in my opinion, with the technology and our ability to control the flow of those types of things. So that is, I mean, for me, a really great question. We spend all this money on, and I mean, this is a little off topic because, our focus is not really climate change, but the reality is, for me, it's what is the proper role of government? And, Calgary and Gondak, for example, the first thing she did, oh, climate emergency, dedicated all this money to a climate emergency, which, whether you agree exists or doesn't exist, is irrelevant, because when a water main breaks and you can't shower, I think that's a little more pertinent. And that's what the tax dollars are supposed to be paying for. So on the provincial side, like even fuel tax, we had a break from the fuel tax, and then she re-implemented it again. And I'm like, but we have the largest budget we've ever had. How about we found somewhere else to just say, hey, let's take a high-speed rail. We don't need that right now. And we'll put that money and whatever effort we're putting into that into keeping the cost of living down for Albertans. So to me, it's about priorities, and the priority needs to be the people, not special interests and lobbyists and big corporations who have her ear, or the people who are around her who want to tell her what she wants to hear. I mean, I want to tell her what the people are saying, right, and what's important to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the high-speed rail thing. I mean, I can understand when they started having this conversation in the 70s about, maybe the need for it, but like Zoom calls exist now. You know what I mean? And we're not, people aren't they don't need to be in Edmonton in an hour, or the percentage of them that do have other, have resources available to make that happen also, right? So it is a ridiculous thing. And if it's a good idea, here's the libertarian perspective on that. If this is a good idea, it would be privately built already, because there would be there would be the profit incentive to make it happen, and that is certainly not the case, right?
Exactly. Good ideas, private industry is all over good ideas that are profitable, right? There's lots of great ideas that never come to fruition. Why? Because they're not profitable, right? Unless government does them. And that seems to be the case. So for me, it's always a matter of, if it is such a great idea, private industry will pick it up and they will do it. And if it's not a good idea and private industry doesn't want to do it, then it probably shouldn't be done, especially. And then again, coming back to priority and coming back to timing, especially right now at this particular time when people are struggling so hard just to pay their bills. Energy. I know my energy bill has doubled. I don't live in an exorbitant mansion by no means. I have a relatively small home in a modest neighborhood, and my bills have all of them have doubled. Food, and I buy my food from a rancher at a fixed rate of $6.75 per pound. But every time I go to the grocery store, it's like at least $100 for a bag, and that's not meat. That's vegetables, and I can't imagine what people are spending who have to buy their beef, and it's like, wow.
Yeah. Well, we have kind of a special little dinner with some friends coming up. So and I was out of my, the meat I buy from a rancher in my freezer, because it's kind of that time of year, right, where you've used it all up all winter. And I went and bought a little roast, a little 3-pound, a nice roast, mind you, but it was like $90 for a 3-pound roast. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
I'll have to hook you up with my guy, but you got to buy a quarter of a cow.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
As sweet as you think. A little deep freeze will keep a quarter of a cow quite nicely.
Oh yeah. No, we do buy a quarter beef every in the fall, and then usually by summertime we're kind of getting hungry again, right? So
yeah, the steaks are the first to go, right? It's like if we're having people over, the roast, the prime rib was eaten long ago.
yeah, absolutely. Let's get back to the 1905 committee. So another, you do have a plank on there about immigration, which I find interesting because you kind of compare it to the policies of Quebec. So first of all, give us kind of an overview on how Quebec manages immigration, and then, what an immigration policy for Alberta should look like.
Well, I mean, the point here that we're trying to make is Quebec has its own policies, in addition to far more power to influence who comes into the country, the numbers that come in, and then, of course, rules around the integration into society, and French language and all these things. So for me, I think it, a more of a made in Alberta in immigration policy. One of the reasons I really put that one in there was we need to put a break on immigration a little bit. And part of our problem is not even immigration into this province, it's migration from other provinces. We had 85,000 people from British Columbia last year moved to Alberta. Then we had, I think, 66,000 just in this first quarter move from BC to Alberta. And I mean, there's not really much you can do about migration, but with those kind of numbers coming from other parts of Canada, now we are one of the largest provinces. We accept the most immigrants than any other province. So combine, the migration that's coming, the immigration, and you're seeing the culture change here as well as a result of that. Danielle Smith has said she'd like 10 million people here in the next 20 years. That's the population. You've just replaced every native-born Albertan.
Yeah, crazy.
What happened to our culture, our values? And I mean, and this is not over time. This is how do you integrate people into that society? And people go, well, Canada. I don't agree with Justin Trudeau's, well, we are a post-nation state, right? And multiculturalism, and everybody can keep their, No, we have to have some sort of fabric that joins us together as a society. And in Alberta, we are just as distinct, in my opinion, as Newfoundland and Labrador is distinct, as Quebec is distinct. There's different things that culturally bind different groups together. And Alberta and its Western heritage will be completely wiped out if we allow 10 million people in the next 20 years into our country. That's insanity.
Is she talking about adding 10 million people? Is that?
No, the population would be 10 million, but we're only 4.7 now. And I mean, look at the chaos, the problems with healthcare, education, and schools. We're looking at infrastructure. I live in Cochrane. The roads here are under construction. It's a nightmare. And it's been that way for the last 3 years. And it's probably going to be that way again. And by the time we finally catch up with the people that are here in the next 3 years, they're still building homes like mad. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be we'll have to redo it all again.
Yeah, for sure. I am a British Columbian refugee, moved an economic refugee from rural BC. Came here about 20 years ago, and but definitely stayed for the culture, to be honest. And married a girl from Calgary, so she was one of the 5 or 6 people born and raised here, so. Probably
I have one of those too. He was one of those the rare person who was born and raised in Calgary.
Yeah.
I keep telling our daughter, it's like, you'll have a story to tell. You'll be one of those rare, true, like born in Calgary kind of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can sympathize with a lot of around immigration. I can sympathize with a lot of the concerns. Is there anything I can sympathize with the concerns. Is there anything in the platform about exactly how immigration should look in Alberta, though?
No, there's nothing that we've been specific. I think the key, first off, is to acknowledge the fact that we have too many people coming in, and we need to put the brakes on and have a conversation about what that will look like. I think we do need tighter controls on who comes into the country. I don't think we just allow an open flow. I don't think we accept the same numbers of immigration that we have in the past. And people go, I love it because when I ran for the PPC, oh, you're a racist. Not at all. We need immigrants, absolutely. But, we also have to provide them with a home and the basic necessities like a job, where they can afford to live in Alberta. And right now we're seeing the people that are born here, and our future. So everything I love. So this is where my Alberta pension plan, I can draw upon it a little bit, because the Alberta pension plan, when I speak, the Canada pension plan identifies 3 key areas that put the Canada pension plan at the greatest risk. Demographics obviously is a big one. Economics is another, but immigration is the third. Now they talk about maybe not having enough people coming in. This is not a numbers problem. It's a quality problem, not a quantity problem. So we need to bring people into the country. Absolutely. Our birth rates are declining. Maybe that's a question to examine as to why, because maybe it's just gotten so expensive to have kids. Maybe all the fear mongering around climate change are deterring people from having kids. So, if we were actually having more children, would we need to bring in as many immigrants? Of course not. But these are questions that politicians don't want to have because they're hard questions and people automatically want to put a label on you or slander you or, tell you you're anti-immigration. And that's not the case. They're just conversations that need to be had. They're solutions that we are completely ignoring because they're tough conversations. And I think we need to get back to having the tough conversations.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, the CPP, like the Canada Pension Plan. You've talked a bit about, the Alberta Pension Plan, but tell me a bit about your thoughts on how the Canada Pension Plan is a broken system.
It was broken before it started. It's set up as a pay-as-you-go system. I always tell people, they're taking the money out of the pocket of the person working today, and they literally are walking it over 10 feet and giving it to the retiree who's retired today. Well, back in 1966, when this started, not such a big deal. It was a fairly small contribution, but it was still pay as you go. There was no money put forward for future generations to catch up on or to fully fund this. There was no intention to do that. They recognized they were going to run out of the ability to do the pay as you go, which is why they reformed it in 1997. And now we're basically, according to the chief actuarial report, come 2026, we're right there again. The money and the pay as you go stops. Now they're going to be dipping into their 590, which is now $630 billion assets to help pay for the benefits of retirees. Albertans being the youngest demographic, we are paying tremendously for this. We are disproportionately paying $3 to $5 billion each and every year. That's an equalization payment to the Canada Pension Plan. 62% of Albertans in a referendum said they wanted to end equalization. Well, those 62% should be saying, bring the Alberta Pension Plan home. Why? Because it's ending the $3 to $5 billion equalization payment to the Canada Pension Plan, which is going to fund other retirees. That money now stays in Alberta for Albertans. And it punishes us because contribution rates have steadily gone up, right? When somebody in 1966 was paying their 3.9%, it's now 11.9. And I also pointed out that Albertans have the youngest demographics, and we also have the highest incomes. So you can't tell me that Ottawa didn't know that when they put the extra 4% on now to the additional income up to $78,000, that Alberta wasn't going to be the ones inadvertently affected most. Like, seriously? There's an additional 4% now on the income from today at 63,500 to 68,000, but next year, or 72,300, next year that goes up to $78,000. Albertans again will pay more. So we are funding the rest of Canada disproportionately. Only 64 cents of every dollar that we make comes back to Alberta. The rest of it goes to the surplus, right? And funding the rest of other retirees in other provinces. And people go, but we need to help the rest of Canada. You know what? Newfoundland and Labrador is a rich province. New Brunswick is a rich province. They have lots of natural resources. You know what the problem is? They're being fed. And they're being fed at the expense of Albertans. And you know what? They'll figure it out, right? They have no incentive to develop their own resources. And that's the problem. If we stop feeding them and we stop pandering, and it's not, if you want to give charity, I'm all for it, but it should come out of your pocket, not government's.
Yeah. Well,
government shouldn't be doing charity on behalf of us. If you want to give charity, then it should come from your pocket direct to where you want to pay it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. The CPP is a Ponzi scheme. And even when we look at the average lifespan of people in the 60s compared to today. I mean, it was like you were expected to live for um, 6 years past retirement, and now you're expected to live for 2024 or something, right? So that's that in
And we had 7, 8 workers for every one retiree. Today we have 3, and that number's still shrinking.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I agree with you that the CPP is a broken system. I agree that Alberta um, should reject it, um, and every Albertan, as an individual, should reject it. Um, but explain to is there because here's I'm going to give you my best libertarian argument is that these types of things should simply not exist. I mean, to me, we can fully privatize a pension plan. It's called a savings account, right? It already exists, and that is ultimately the fairest approach to it. Um, why convince me to support an Alberta pension plan?
I won't.
Okay.
One of the things I do in my meeting is I show people what they could have done with this exact same money if they and their contributions matched by their employers had they invested it themselves. With a modest, 5% rate of return, that's $1.3 million that in 45 years that they would have. Under the Canada pension plan, they're lucky if they get what they've contributed back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's a problem. So should they have done it? No. But the problem is on the Alberta pension plan, we can't opt out. The best we can do is make it better. So I'm all for, let's make it better. Let's bring it home. Here's my thing. You cannot change what you do not control. Right? And we do not control anything about the Canada pension plan. At least if we bring it home and make it an Alberta pension plan, now people are empowered. We have the ability to influence the provincial government far greater than the federal government to make changes that are far more favorable to Albertans.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's the argument.
Yeah.
It's you make a great point. Why do we have it at all? I'd be happy to scrap it all together, and give the people the money, allow them to keep it, even if it was a forced savings plan. That would be better if it was only in their own individual account. Now they control it, they influence it, they could hand it down to the spouse, they could hand it down to their children. But under the reality of the Canada pension plan, what happens if you die at the age of 64 as a single man or a single woman? You know what? You never collected a penny. Guess who kept all the money? It's a tax. It's a payroll tax. I mean, that's the truth. It's not a pension. It's a tax.
Yeah. Fully agree. And this kind of leads into the last kind of plank on the platform, which is a constitutional convention. When you say we have no opportunity to opt out of the CPP, that's something that is legislated through Ottawa, basically, right? So, talking about a constitutional convention, some of the things you guys mentioned on the website are equalization. Let's just go through each of them. We want to be conscious of the time. We got 10 or 15 minutes left, but equalization. So obviously, I'm assuming we're talking about scrapping equalization altogether.
I'm an advocate of Albertans. If we want to give charity, then there's other ways to do it than through a forced payment called equalization. And so, that's my vote, scrap equalization. And we had a referendum on that. 62% of Albertans agree that we need to get rid of equalization payments, or at least we need to amend them, change them. And it's so funny because people coming back to leadership, people keep thinking, oh, when Pierre Poilievre gets in, oh, it's going to be so different. We had Stephen Harper. How different do things become? He increased the equalization payment. He put more burden on Albertans in many ways, right? So don't think Pierre Poilievre is going to come to our rescue. He's not an advocate of us having our own Alberta pension plan. We already know that. As far as us, yeah. So again, people have to get involved, stay involved. It needs to be a grassroots. Leaders are not going to save us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I could go on about Stephen Harper for a while. We'll save that for next time.
Okay, we'll do it
I,
again.
I will say the one thing I miss about Stephen Harper is that, compared to the guy we got now, I mean, Stephen Harper was well spoken. He was respectful. You know what I mean? Aside from a few small gaffes, but man, the guy, the guy we got now, who I really hate, makes me um, nostalgic for Stephen Harper, which I'm ashamed to
Well, see,
say.
I'm a little different though, because I like the fact that we have Justin Trudeau. I hope Justin Trudeau stays for the next election because people see him for what he is, because he is very open about it. He's not smart and cunning like a Mark Carney
Mm,
would be.
gotcha.
And Mark Carney is a very dangerous man. He is definitely a global elitist. You know, he sits on the board of Brookfield Asset Management. He's been the Bank of England, Bank of Canada. Like, he's a smart man. And so those individuals in positions of power to me are far um, more dangerous than your Justin Trudeau's. Justin Trudeau becomes obvious. Everybody goes, "Oh gosh, get rid of that guy. Who, he's an idiot, whatever." But the reality is, even your Pierre Poilievres who come out, and they know how to wiggle around politically with the right language and smooth this over and focus your attention over here. Give a little. But Stephen Harper, we can go on, but he was the one who introduced us to Agenda 2020,
Hmm.
right? He signed us up for a lot of these, the problems that we're having
Oh yeah.
today,
Oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
So, we can't blame it only on the liberals. Both parties, all the parties have a role that they've played in getting us to where we are.
Yeah, yeah, fully agree. Um, so I get, I guess here's the argument about a constitutional convention. Um, and this is a conversation, I've had with a lot of people, which is that given the crazy leftist nonsense that permeates all of Canadian society these days, um, we could open up the Constitution and we could end up with something a whole lot worse than what we have now. And I mean, it's terrifying to think that um, that would, your organization in good faith wants to potentially open up the Constitution to discuss some things: equalization, access to tidewater, health transfer payments. Um, but the risk is that you get other provinces.
It ends up worse than better.
Yeah, exactly. What are your thoughts on that?
And you're absolutely right. So even Constitutional Convention, if you look at the because the United States probably discussed Constitutional Convention far more than Canada has. And they have a real method means of doing it. But again, it's never really been done. Why? Because you could end up with a lot worse a scenario than a lot better. The reason that we put Constitutional Convention in there was because if you note it in the language, it's about conversations with the provinces. We need to have the provinces respect their jurisdictions a lot more, and the provinces to display a lot more of the autonomy and the power that they have. And we need to have more conversation amongst the provinces as to how we can resolve some of these problems and make them more fair and just for everybody. So it can't be that you rush right in and you go, "Hey, let's reopen the Constitution that was written in 1982 and rewrite." That's not going to happen, nor should it. But what does need to happen is a conversation from amongst the provinces that says, "Look, this is what the Constitution says. This is why Alberta is being hurt or so badly beaten up, and it's not fair. And we need to make adjustments, right?" And as a country, I mean, it makes no sense to me on the whole Quebec's objection to pipelines, for example. They're bringing oil and gas in from Saudi Arabia. They're bringing oil and gas in from Iran. But somehow Alberta oil and gas is bad. I mean, again, coming back to Alberta pension plan, I mean, up until last year, they had welcome to a carbon neutral Canada, not a carbon neutral world. We're not trying to focus our attention on reducing global emissions, which we can do, right? We could easily do that by what? Putting a pipeline in and getting our clean, ethical, best technology, you know, that oil over to to India, over to China, over to Europe. No, no, we're not having that conversation. It's just about shutting down the oil and gas industry here in Canada. We could turn Canada into a national park, changes nothing on the emission side. Absolutely nothing. So again, I want to focus the 1905 committee on policies and principles. And then let's take an honest, hard look at how our leaders stack up to those policies and to those principles that Albertans hold dearest to them. And that's how we should be casting our vote. That's how we should be casting our ballots each and every time. If they don't stack up, then they shouldn't be getting the support. And we use this as a measure and a means of communicating with our government to say where they're falling down, and where they can improve. And the choice then becomes theirs to either, continue on the path that they're on or to improve. So like I've had people call me up and go, "You want to remove Danielle Smith?" I'm like, not at all. That is not at all an objective. What I want is accountability. She made promises. I expect her to keep them. Right? There are people who put her there, who she has completely let down. And you know what? They're walking away from politics. And you know what? That doesn't serve her or the UCP or anybody. Why? Because now you have Nenshi coming up, right? Most likely he will be the next leader of the NDP. We're already in dire flip a coin in Calgary as to which way things are going to go. And how do you think losing the base that she has is only going to exasperate that? It's going to make that situation worse. So, I'm hoping to catch it early, right? Before it becomes 6 months before an election, a scramble to how do we fix this problem?
Yeah, right on. So you're having a meeting. Are we allowed to share the details on the upcoming 1905 committee meeting?
Yeah, so it is by invitation only.
Okay.
I did put the invitation out to some thought leaders and some people from different backgrounds, and some people, like I said, politically who do not align with the UCP at all, have never been a UCP member. And because it's not about the UCP, it is about 1905 wants to be that policy and principles. So the outcome of that meeting, the intent is to walk away with 5 to 7 principles that are non-negotiable. And these are the principles that we will then assess policies and develop policies that we want to push and see. But again, I don't want it to be a one-man show. Like we saw what happened with TBA. It became a David Parker show. And I don't want to speak badly about David because he did some wonderful things, but he's got very strong views and opinions and, outbursts that have turned a lot of people off. I want this to be very professional, very well run, very well organized, very educational and informational, and citizenry that is advocating for policies and principles. It's not because I said so. It's here's the report card. Here are the facts. Now you make a decision.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Okay, I will just add, so I plan on being there. Thank you for the invitation. I will say here's my question. If I want to add a policy or a platform plank to this, it would be something along the lines of, can we just privatize some shit already?
So what would the principle behind that be? Smaller government?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Restricted spending.
Yeah, restricted spending.
Right? Proper role of government.
Capitalizing on the profit and loss mechanism, right? I mean, these are there's lots of good reasons. I'll prepare something. And send it to you before I show up at your meeting and say that.
Send it away. Well, the thing is, I've submitted a number of UCP policies to the UCP for the review in November, which is why somebody like yourself get involved in the 1905. And people go, well, I'm not giving UCP $1 of my money, but you have to get involved. And it's not about supporting the UCP. right? It's like you buy the UCP membership. Why? Because you're a conservative. You're conservative in your principles. You're conservative in your values. You like the policies of 1905, and you want to stand with us to support that. So we've got to get away from the party politics a little bit and start looking. And again, the best way I could think to do that was principles and policies. So I don't care whether you're a UCP supporter or not, but in order to affect change in the government we have right now, the best and the easiest way to do that is to get involved, to become a UCP member, buy your membership, and then get a ticket. It's early bird right now till June 17th. $119 will get you in the door to the AGM. Now you have a say, because people say this all the time. Oh, I'm only one vote. You're going to vote 30 times on policies. You're going to vote 30 times on governance. You're going to vote in a leadership review. That's more than one vote, right? And it's amazing how few people come out to these things. And so if there's only a few people that come out, well, those are the few people who are having all the influence. Right? So be one of the ones, be part of the few, the small minority that takes the time to get involved, to come out, let your voice be known.
Nadine, thank you for coming on the show. This was really good, and I really appreciate what you're up to.
Thank you. I appreciate you very much, and keep doing what you're doing. It's all about information, and for people to be able to hear it from different perspectives, right? And you can't be everything to everyone. So
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Nadine.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you to Nadine Wellwood from the 1905 Committee. You can check them out at 1905committee.ca. We will be releasing videos from the Capitalism and Morality Calgary seminar, so stay up to date here.